All right, all right. Hey, everybody, we are live. My name, for those who don't know me, is Ben Jackson, and I'm one of the co founders of the nonprofit Upsolve. We help people break free from debt and achieve the American dream. I'm also the host of the Break Free podcast. You might have seen me there. Regardless, though, if you're here tonight, the chances are that you or somebody you love is struggling with debt and you're looking for answers. And the good news is you're not alone. Like, we're here with a bunch of other people, and we are ready to help you navigate your options. For those who don't know my story, this work is like really personal for me. Many of you might know, and those who don't, that many years ago, I was personally drowning in debt after I had a small business fail. And I was only making $20,000 a year trying to pay off $60,000 in credit card debt. Didn't work, right? Like I could drive Uber and Lyft as much as I wanted, and those interest payments were just stacking up. It was super overwhelming, and like I felt trapped by that whole experience. It was scary. But through financial education and the right tools, I found a way forward. And that's why we at Upsolve do these webinars to give you the knowledge and confidence to take control of your finances and build the life that you deserve. And that is why I'm really excited to introduce our guest today, Mr. Michael Bovee. Let's see if I can get him centered on the screen here. New platform. There we go. So Michael is a nationally recognized debt relief expert with over 25 years of experience helping consumers manage and settle their debts. He's the founder of the Consumer Recovery Network, which is a company dedicated to empowering people to protect their rights and make sound financial decisions so that they can reduce the stress of overwhelming debt. Michael's also been a really strong advocate for ethical debt settlement practices. He and I were just talking before we went live here on kind of how like most of the market around settlement is not particularly honest or upstanding. There's a lot of people out there who are, using like a one size fits all approach to debt relief. And Michael's very much not about that approach. He'll tell it like it is, help you understand when it's right for you and when it's not, and help you navigate really complex negotiations with creditors, which, as you'll hear today, is one of the main things that makes settlement challenging and also that can make it successful when you're armed with the right expertise. Michael has a deep knowledge and a consumer first approach, and that makes him the perfect person to guide us through today's session. So, welcome, Michael. Thanks for joining us.
Awesome. I'm so happy to be here.
Good to have you, my man. So before we talk about like the details of settlement, can you share a little bit about like what inspired you to dedicate your career to helping people resolve their debt struggles?
So I got bitten by the debt bug, unbeknownst to me that there was a debt bug, but that's what happened in 1994. I had a friend of mine that was being harassed, actually cussed at and everything.
Hmm.
94 was a different time than today. Debt collectors absolutely did this kind of thing. Not all of them, but some. And I was like, well, wait a minute, he can't do that. And so I did some research and I found
Hmm.
the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, right? And I thought, well, this is something that an attorney is going to want to hear about because this guy broke the
Yeah,
law, cussing out my
definitely.
friend. And I called some attorneys and they were just tell your friend to pay his phone bill. And there was no help for him. Nobody could use that as leverage. And I ultimately, I helped him settle that debt. So I actually settled my first debt in 94. And it was out of anger that I got
Hmm.
interested in this topic. And that kind of spread a little bit in my
Yeah.
circle of influence. And I had people come up to me with issues and problems over the course of the next 5 years. And so when I was looking for a career change in 99, I was working in a field that I was out of state for months at a time. And I just had my second child and I didn't want to do that anymore. I already was enamored with this topic. So it was kind of something fell in my lap and I started working for a company. And then I started my own 5 years later in 2004, doing things the way I thought they should be done.
So what do you wish was different when you were struggling with debt? Like what's kind of like the world that you're pushing for to develop based on that experience?
For me, it's the internet wasn't quite what it is today, right? And today you have so much information at your fingertips. Sometimes it's a little too much. And there's some bad information. There are bad actors in debt relief services, basically of any flavor, really. And my number one goal, and it's been this goal since 2004, is to provide information and education, useful, applicable information and a deep, deep understanding of what your options are when you
Hmm.
hit the debt wall. We all hit the debt wall at varying
Hmm.
speeds. Some
I
of us
love that. Yeah.
flat straight to bankruptcy.
Yep.
Some of us we see it coming and we start to course correct and we hit it, we barely scratch it, we don't even
Yeah.
call it into insurance because you can't even see it, right?
I
It doesn't
love that
even matter
metaphor.
how hard
Yeah.
you hit the wall. There's
Yeah.
really only a few intervention steps. So it's when
Hmm.
there's only a couple things to help people understand at a deep level and how it can help them, you can get through it pretty quickly. So that's
Yeah.
my goal.
Yeah, and I know it doesn't feel like that. I know when I was struggling with debt, I was like, "Holy cow, like, if I start reading today, I'll be, like, dead by the time I finish reading the options that I have here. This is insane." And
A lot.
one of the ones that, you and I have talked about a lot, one that you really specialize in, which is why we're doing this webinar, is debt settlement. So can you explain to the audience, like, what is debt settlement? Like, what does that mean? How does it work?
Sure. It's the idea that something is better than nothing. So
Yeah.
every bank, every lender, I don't care
Mm,
how large, right? If they loan money for a living at all, they understand that not everybody's going to be able to pay them back. And so
mm,
they develop policies and procedures, protocols that they employ when you meet certain criteria, they're willing to deal. And
mm,
if they're not, once they place their accounts into these collection pipelines, of which there are really only three,
mhm,
everybody in those pipelines will deal, right?
mm,
So it's really just a meeting of the minds. It's like, hey, I couldn't pay, something happened.
yeah,
I still am not well off, but
mm,
I do still want to resolve this. And what debt collectors want, and I don't care if they work for a bank, a collection agency, a
mm,
law firm, or a debt buyer. All they want, if they had their druthers, is to spend time talking to people or collecting from people that show one of two things or both
mm,
of these things: willingness and ability.
mm,
And so when you've got those two things and you meet their criteria for what they'll do to
mm,
give you a decent discount, and
mm,
sometimes you don't need all the money at once. Sometimes you can get that settlement and spread it out over time. So it's maybe more accessible to you than you realize
mm,
because of their willingness to work within your means, right?
mm,
That's all it is. It's just a meeting of the minds, but you have to meet certain criteria. And the
yeah,
number one criteria for settlement is you have to already be late. And not just a
okay.
little, usually
So
a lot.
so I couldn't just call in and say, "Hey, I owe you $10,000. I'll give you 8 if I was making my regular payments."
Right, right. There's a very little exception to that. There's
Hmm,
historically in my career, there are inflection points in our economy where you could do something like that. Really, economic downturns
sure.
for one. But typically, you have to be some measure of late. And even if
Okay.
you're not late, and let's say they did give you 2,000 off,
Yeah.
they're going to update your credit report to show the settlement, and it's going to hurt your credit score just the same as if you had done it the right way and gotten less than half
Okay.
of a settlement, right? So you
Gotcha.
maximize your savings by following the map.
So you mentioned a second ago, there's kind of like 3, I think pathways was the word that you used, 3 pathways around debt settlement. Can you flesh out a little bit more like what those scenarios are?
So there's intervention steps or there's
Okay.
three collection buckets, right?
Okay.
And when it comes to settlement, when you are dealing with your bank, you're dealing with your bank, right?
Mhm,
You're like, let's say it's a credit card. Banks, and this is summarily true with all credit card banks. There are
mhm,
some exceptions. Amex is one. A couple of small credit unions might have a different timeline, but for the most part, most credit card banks are going to follow an accounting principle that they are
mhm,
required. They're going to be audited so they comply.
mhm,
If they haven't been paid in 180 days, they're going to do what's called a charge off.
hmm.
That
What's that?
charge off is an accounting function found in generally accepted accounting principles, and the
Mhm,
OCC and other provincial federal regulators watch banks for their compliance.
mhm.
It's an accounting term.
Okay.
Believe it or not, your bank can actually consider your account, even though it's not been paid for 100 days, it's still an asset on their
Hmm.
books.
Interesting.
Charge off is when they are required to move it
Yeah.
from an asset column to a loss column.
Mhm.
And they can't wait anything longer than 180 days of consecutive non-payment to do that, right?
What happens
And
if they
so
wait too long?
yeah, well, if they wait that long, most banks, if you're going to get a good deal with them, they just offer it right when you buck up against that timeline when they're going to have to recognize the loss and file it in their 10Ks with Wall Street. It affects their share price, and not
Hmm,
just a little, right? And so they
hmm,
wait until the last minute to
hmm.
do it because of that element.
Okay,
But
interesting.
after the charge off, there's three buckets your bank is going to subject an account to. Not all banks use all three. Some banks use all three, but it's in size. I'll give them to you. So first off, there are contingency debt collection agencies, and I call them contingency because they only get paid contingent upon getting you to pay.
Hmm,
So their goal, if they
okay.
are going to make a dime, is to work with you, figure out some way to resolve your account. They become a very, very big part of almost anybody's debt settlement program, if you will. The second bucket of size are debt buyers. Now, all debt buyers are aggressive. They will sue to collect, but
Hmm,
virtually all of them are pretty easy to work with. I mean, they'll do a settlement, they'll give you time to pay that your creditor didn't give you time to do. So they become a pretty, depending on who your creditor is, if they sell debt to debt buyers, they become an element of success in a
Hmm.
debt settlement. And then the third bucket, it is the smallest bucket, but it will not feel small to you if it happens to you. That's when your creditors send your account, or a debt buyer sends your account to a collection law
Uh,
firm.
yeah.
And there are varying degrees of settlement percentages you hit with each
Hmm.
of these debt collectors and
Hmm.
debt buyers. Even law firms, the bigger law firms might give better discounts, the smaller, it just depends, right? There's these
Okay.
moving targets
Got
depending
it.
on what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with. So
Got
those are
it.
the buckets.
Okay. So if I got that right, just make sure I'm following you. So there's when you owe money to the original creditor. So let's say Bank of America, there's that bucket. And then there's when they've sold that account at a loss, typically to a debt collector. And then there is when you're being sued by that debt collector and there's some sort of negotiation with the law firm. Is that right?
Sure. So there's the bigger bucket, right?
Yep.
The contingents and collectors. And Bank of America is a really good example. I'll just preface this by saying this is what's happening today on the day of this live
Sure.
recording, right? And so anybody watching this back any other day, we
Hmm.
can't vouch for this information.
Sure.
Today,
Yeah.
that if you're late with Bank of America 181 days, they're going to charge your account off because they have to. And
Hmm.
their tendency, their business model right
Yep.
now is to send it to a collection agency for 90 days. That collection agency will work hard to try and get something for that account
Hmm.
and earn their keep because they're not going to earn a dime otherwise.
Okay.
If after 90 days nothing happens with that account, Bank of America is going to pull it back and they're
Hmm.
going to do it again to another collection
Interesting.
agency because they
Okay.
don't sell debt. Bank of America hasn't, as of today, they don't sell debt since 2015.
Wow.
So they use these collection agencies, they use two of them,
Yeah.
and then after that, you're 13th month late. I'm not saying they're all gonna go to an attorney, but that's when they begin to
That's where it
think about
starts to.
doing that, right?
Interesting.
So, yeah,
So there's really
again,
no like hard and fast rules. It's not like 180 days, this time is run, now it's a debt collector, now it's going to court, whatever. It really depends on who the person that owns the debt is, it sounds like.
and each one of these things can be a moving target. Now, granted,
Wow.
most of these banks don't change their policies and procedures in this way on a dime,
Yeah,
not even
sure.
close. But it's one of the things that I publish a lot of self-help guides, DIY and otherwise,
Mhm.
and I always have, well, not always, but
Yeah.
since 2004. Um, I can't publish certain things because it turns out to be ineffective
Mm,
or not what you really need, real-time
mhm.
data. And that's why I like doing these things. It's like, well, let's spread some information.
Sure.
I post, I respond to everybody's comments in my YouTube videos. And even though the video's 10 years old, you post a comment and ask a question about
You'll see it,
what's
yeah.
Bank of America doing today? Well, then you get real-time data.
Yeah, so go to the comment section on Michael's YouTube channel. I'll share it with you all later. So obviously, we talk about a lot of different debt relief options. So at Upsolve, the one that we primarily provide for people is Chapter 7 bankruptcy, which we refer to as a fresh start. Your debt largely goes away, you move on with your life. Bankruptcy is not for everybody. I'd imagine the same is true of debt settlement. So how do you decide when you should do something like bankruptcy or something like debt settlement or a debt management plan?
So for me, it's math. If
Oh boy.
you're not late on your bills right
Yeah.
now and you're trying to make them more affordable because you're running out of money before you run out of month,
Hmm.
then I like debt management plans. I like getting your interest rate lowered. Let's say your average interest rate across 6 cards is 23%.
Hmm.
What if it was all reduced down to an average of 6% and that made
Hmm.
it more affordable for you? Well, that's
Sure.
an easy. That's you don't even have to hurt your credit. You get this predictable timeline of 5 years or less to pay off your credit card debt from participating creditors in these nonprofit debt management plans. If that's out of reach or you're already late, look at bankruptcy. In
Mm,
fact, I generally tell people you should at least understand if you qualify for Chapter 7, even if you can afford those bills, because
mm,
what can you do to set yourself up for your future? In like most bankruptcy in most states, it takes 90 days, right? Other
mm.
than California.
Okay.
So if you could reset your finances, get that fresh start inside of 3 or 4 months instead of 5 years
Sure.
because you qualify, look at how much of a head start you're going to have on your
Yeah.
future, right?
Yeah,
By just
totally.
making that one big life adjustment.
Mhm.
And it's not what people make it out to be. Like, I don't know how much you guys cover this, but I work with people that, they're getting a pre-approved credit card offer in the mail from Capital One and
Yeah.
others a month after their bankruptcy.
Yeah, no,
It's not
it's not even a
great
week.
credit.
I remember
Yeah.
getting one of those, like, the day after I got my bankruptcy discharge back in the day. It's wild.
I know, they think, "Oh, my credit, I'm in purgatory for
Yeah.
10 years." Listen, it's on your
Yeah.
credit for 10 years.
Yep.
But, yeah, credit cards coming to you right
Yep.
away. They're not great ones, but you take 1 or 2 of
Yep.
them to help rebuild. You can get a car loan right after bankruptcy, but don't, because who wants to pay
Yeah,
13
that
or
high interest rate.
14% on a
Yeah.
car loan? Just wait a year and you'll get a good rate as if you
Yeah.
didn't file bankruptcy, right? And you
Yep.
can qualify for a home loan, 2 years if it's FHA, 3 years for everybody else. So that's not 10 years, right?
Mhm.
So what if you could reset your finances?
Mm.
And so what my industry likes to tell people is that debt settlement applies to all of those folks we just talked about. People that don't want to hurt their
Mm.
credit because debt settlement kills your credit.
Sure.
People that otherwise maybe afford their bills and want to, but they sell them on this other concept, right? People that should belong in a chapter 7. Again, reset your finances in 90 days or buy into this debt settlement company's 3 or 4 year plan that's going to kill your credit for the whole time and expose you to other
Mm.
collection risks like those buckets that I
Mhm.
talked about. So I really like chapter 7 before I even think of settlements. That's one of
Mm.
the things I do. I've got every state available to me. I look it up on every phone call that I'm on with somebody. Can they do chapter 7?
Yeah.
Um, debt settlement's more of an alternative to chapter 13.
Hmm.
Just that's what it's there for. That's the purpose that it serves.
Okay.
Somebody that's already late probably doesn't need to be in a debt management
Mhm.
plan if you're late a few months. And so I would at least weigh settlement versus a debt management plan. But bankruptcy chapter 7 first, and amongst all of the debt relief options, I usually look at chapter 13 last just
Hmm.
because of its rigidity.
Hmm.
It has its place, absolutely has its place. But debt settlement, usually that's what it competes with.
Hmm. Okay. Got it. So 13 is really competing with debt settlements in many instances. What are the advantages or disadvantages? And actually, if you could explain what Chapter 13 is for those who don't know, we talk about Chapter 7 primarily, but I'd be curious to hear what
Yeah.
exactly is 13 and why does it compare to settlement primarily?
So they often call it a wage earners plan. So
Yeah.
you need regular income. Income that fluctuates means you're just going to fall off your 13. So they look for somebody with regular income.
Hmm.
It's a repayment plan over either a 36 or a 60 months. It's going to be 3 or 5 years. There's no in between.
Okay.
And most of them go 5 years because the job of the court at a 13 is to get as much money from you to distribute it out to your creditors equally. It's also how they pay themselves. Okay.
Hmm.
So they take you just this close to out of money every month in order to distribute those funds.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
the fact that you're in a 13 means life happens.
Yep.
Is life going to stop happening in for 5 years?
Probably
And so
not.
that's yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with 13. It has its place. It takes you so close to the edge
Mm.
of being able to afford your life every
Hmm.
month for 60 months
Hmm.
that traditionally the
Mm.
vast majority, by vast I mean close to 2/3, a little more
Yeah.
than 2/3 of the people that have ever filed 13 don't complete it because of
Wow.
that
Two
rigidity,
thirds. That's
right?
amazing.
Roll that into a chapter 7.
Hmm.
I don't know the numbers on that. I don't
Hmm.
think I've ever seen them actually.
Hmm.
But here's your opportunity to do settlement as opposed to a 13 is generally going to be also minutes. It's also going to be how much money can I bring together in this requisite period of time
Hmm.
with these particular creditors. Some
Hmm.
some creditors are aggressive, really
Hmm.
aggressive, and some are not. And some will give
Hmm.
you a bunch of time to pay, 2, 3 years to pay on your settlement.
Hmm.
And so you don't need a 13. But what if? What if your deck is so stacked against you that you've got nothing but aggressive creditors?
Hmm.
Yep, 13 is going to probably save you a lot of headache because
Mm.
guess what?
Okay. Interesting.
Banks can't sue you, creditors
Yeah.
can't call you, write to you. They can't. I mean, the court has all
Interesting.
the power. It gets to tell
Yeah.
all your creditors, sit down, shut up. The adults are talking. We'll call you up here if we need you. Oh, not thinking we're going to need you if you want to go home. Bye bye. Right? And they tell them they set the pace for your
Okay.
finances. The court does that,
Interesting.
not the creditors. They don't really have a role to play.
Gotcha.
But the problem is that the court also gets to tell you how to live, like I
Mm.
said, within your means, and they set your means.
And when that's gonna be a pretty tight belt, those means, I'd imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say I decided settlement's the right thing for me. We've gone through this questionnaire morass, triaging process with Michael. We've decided settlement's the thing. What is that process gonna look like?
Well, it depends. Do you want to be involved in the process? Because I help people just do it themselves,
Mm.
right? So you can save a bundle on fees, or you can get direct help, and somebody can do that
Yeah.
for you, right?
So if I do it
But
myself, what does that look like?
you make the calls,
Okay.
you reach out to creditors. Some of them are super easy. You just have to log into a website and check
Hmm.
deals, once a month.
Oh, wow.
There's there'll be more of that as we go.
Cool.
I'll have a video out in a couple, maybe a few more weeks, and it's the future of debt relief.
Okay.
I'll talk about some of the banks that are doing that, and I think we're going to see more and more of that. It'll simplify most people's efforts to settle
Mhm.
debt on their own. It's not complicated, you guys.
Okay.
Debt settlement is not rocket science, not by
Yeah.
any stretch of the imagination. It's just that if you follow a certain formula, you get the right outcome. So it's a little
Mhm.
scientific. It's just not science.
Yeah.
Um,
So if you heard it,
the
folks, check out Michael's YouTube page. I'm sharing it up on the screen here. I think I'm sharing it up on the screen here. Mike,
Yeah,
can
that's it.
you see it? Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So Michael Bovee at Michael Bovee on YouTube. He'll have information on there coming out soon about that. That's really cool. I didn't know they were doing portals like that.
It's getting easier, folks.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, so if I'm calling in, is this like a one phone call process? Is this something where I'm going to have to call in a bunch of times? How does that usually go?
It can be.
Okay.
I liken it. There's two types of collection. You call a collector or a collection shop, and there's two types of negotiation.
Mhm.
There's the attrition-based negotiation where you're not going to get the floor of what's
Mhm.
available for a settlement until X number of file touches, right? Somebody had to open that file, put a note in it, and that's a touch. And that
Mhm.
means you probably called or sent something in, right?
Mhm.
Or and then maybe it's 5, maybe that attrition is 7, 9, 20. There are 20s. It
Hmm.
sucks, but there are. And then there's people that are trained to get money from you at any cost on that phone call. And I like those because you can watch them negotiate with themselves right in front of your eyes. It's like, I can only afford this on this
Yeah.
$5,000 balance. And it's like, there's no way we can do that, but we can do this.
Yeah.
It's like, there's no way I can do that. You don't understand. I'm on disability. I'm doing this.
Yeah.
There are things that you can say that will
Mm.
cause them to go like they'll throw this high number out there,
Mm.
and then you say, I really appreciate that and thank you, and always be polite when you're talking to these people.
Mm.
There's no
Oh, yeah.
reason to
Good
get ugly
advice.
or mean or nasty. Um, just I can't manage that. I don't know how I would begin to manage that. And they
Mm.
say, hold on, let me just hold on a second. I'll put you on hold. Let me talk to somebody. And they come back and suddenly now it's a lower offer.
Hmm.
What, they don't even I don't know how that's gonna happen. And this is
Yeah.
how these things can play out, where they're trained to not let you off the phone without some money. And
Hmm.
sometimes that
Interesting.
means locking in
Yeah.
a settlement at their floor, but you have to find that floor.
Find what the
And it just
floor
so
is.
happens that when you do this every day and you help people do it every day, you know the floors. And
Yeah.
so we share that information so that we can make you a success.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. So do they have, I mean, when they say they're going over to talk to a manager or something like that, are they actually doing that? Like, is there some discretion is this, or do they kind of have like rules about what they're able to settle for?
So there's some legitimacy, right?
Okay.
Think about it like well, I don't know who to pick on here. Bank of America, since we already picked on. So I
Sure.
told you earlier that today, as of this recording, as of this conversation, they send it to a collection agency, a contingency collection
Hmm.
agency, right after you're 6 months late. Now they give that collection agency parameters. And if they want anything underneath those parameters and they think that they have a legitimate reason to go back to their contact at Bank of America and ask for this exception, it can happen. And they are required to go get some kind of
Hmm.
approval of something. Now, they may just have their own internal floor and they need a supervisor's permission to try and get it lower.
Hmm.
A lot of times these supervisors would jump on the phone and
Hmm.
take the phone from the collector and hit you hard. Some of the collectors, the supervisors are the hardest hitting ones, right? The kind of that reputational Billy Goat Gruff collector.
Sure.
And some of them are sweet as pie, right?
Yeah.
But there's legitimacy to these floors. There's legitimacy to having to get permissions. The collector in the chair is the least likely to be able to think on their feet and make you a deal without having to get
Yeah. That's
underneath the
interesting.
normal threshold. Then so just understand that there also can be some gamesmanship. It's collection. Of course, there's
Sure.
some
Yeah.
gamesmanship. And it's
Trying to
like,
get their money
hold on, let
somehow.
me talk to my boss, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that used car dealership kind of thing. It's like, hold on, let me go talk to financing. And they go back there and they're getting coffee. And I don't know if they talk to anybody, right? Sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure there could be something like that. But
Yeah.
for the most part, there are legitimate hard
Such a
stops.
funny example. Yeah. Well, I'm conscious of the
No
time
offense
here,
to car
Michael.
dealerships.
Yeah, I
So
know. Who knows what's going on? Maybe they are negotiating.
I don't know a thing. Yeah,
Yeah, I just bought a new car a couple weeks ago and had that same experience. I was like, "What is actually happening right now?" But yeah, I'm conscious of the time here. I really appreciate it, Michael. I feel like you and I could talk about these topics forever. I want to give the audience
easily.
some time for questions. So I have seen some come in already. If you do have any questions for Michael or I, please throw them in the chat. I will read them out. We've got one in here, Michael, that says, "Are all types of debt eligible for debt settlement?"
No.
Hmm.
No, generally speaking, you want to focus on unsecured debt. So these are
Okay.
credit cards, right? We pick on those unsecured loans, even payday loans. You think payday loans, they have a claim on your pay. They don't.
Hmm.
So
Interesting.
it's unsecured debt that you generally want to settle. Now, having said that, if you have a car loan that you couldn't pay back and they repossessed it and they auctioned it, and then what's left over that you might still owe is called a deficiency balance, that's now unsecured, and
Oh,
we can go
interesting.
negotiate that,
So
right?
if I don't have the car
Um,
anymore, but there's still additional debt because they sold it
there's
for
still
less
some.
than I owed. Okay, interesting.
They took
Huh.
the secured, right? We did a
Yeah.
lot of this stuff during the housing-led recession where we were, for the first time in my career, we were able to negotiate mortgages because
Wow.
they no longer had the home,
Yeah.
but there was still a deficiency, or you
Deficiency
signed a
on it.
promissory note to get out of the deal, and then we could negotiate the promissory note. So,
That's
but
cool.
by and large, I want people to think about the typical unsecured debt, which
Mhm.
is credit cards and personal loans.
Yeah. Okay. So this one says, you mentioned like two options. I can do this on my own, or I can pay somebody to help me do it. Uh, I don't want to do this on my own. It sounds scary. They're saying, how much do debt settlement companies charge for their services usually?
Too much. Um, it's just too much.
Yeah.
So, it's you should have sticker shock, but it's kinda disguised
Yeah.
because what they sell you on is a monthly payment. "Oh, you can't
Oh,
afford your
interesting.
$750 a month? How
Yeah.
about we get this reduced to $300 a month over the next 48 months?" And it sounds
Mm.
like the relief you were looking for, right?
Hmm.
So you don't see necessarily the math. I mean, they
Yeah.
give it to you because they're required to, but in the fine print, but sometimes we don't stop to actually look and say, "Wait a minute, so you're charging me 25% of what I owe?" Eventually, that's your ultimate fee. Regardless of whether you get a good or bad outcome, you're going to
Mm.
charge me 25. Some even charge 30% of your debt total that you submit to them,
Wow.
right? I find
30%.
that a little gross.
Huh.
So, um, some people think it's worth it, and that's fine. I personally wouldn't want to pay that kind of. If you're getting me
Yeah.
stellar outcomes, I want to pay for that. But
Sure.
some people don't get stellar outcomes, and they
Mm.
still pay the fee because the fee is based on their debt load, not
Hmm.
the outcome. And
Oof.
so I've
Okay.
always charged based on outcome.
Yeah.
And I wish others, I mean, a lot more did when I first started in this industry. It
Mm.
wasn't really an industry back then, not like it is today. And
Mhm.
most everybody charged based on the amount of the result they got you,
Mm.
not the amount of debt that you submitted to them.
So in one of those instances, if I'm charging 30 or if the settlement company is charging 30% of the debt load and I owe $10,000 and they get it negotiated down to 7, it's just been a wash.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
and
Okay.
that's not even counting, potential tax implications
Oh,
on that
wait.
debt, so you
What's
might
that?
actually not have come out ahead at all. You
What
might
wait, what are the
actually
tax
still.
implications? I have to pay taxes
Yes,
on
there
debt?
are tax. Yeah.
What?
So, yeah, that's, we'll keep going with questions, but
Yeah,
just
yeah, that's
understand, you
crazy.
guys, just because you settled the debt doesn't mean that it's over. The IRS might want a piece of you, and
Wow.
it's a variable. Not everybody pays tax on forgiven
That's
debt, but
crazy.
it is something that you have to be aware of and budget for.
This user's saying, "Can I settle medical bills?"
Yeah. Yeah. Most of the I have a video, a very specific video for that question. I want you to go to my YouTube channel and look up my medical debt video because it's nuanced. There's something called illegal discounting. Not that anybody goes to jail. It's where there's a contract between the medical service provider, the hospital, the billing company, and the insurance company, right? And the insurance company says, "Listen, we're paying you what we owe you. And if you later go back and give the consumer, the patient, a discount on their whatever their copay, you have to retroactively apply that to us and send us some money back." How
Hmm.
often do you think these people send the insurance companies money back?
Never.
Basically, never, right? So I talk about that more in the video than, and you'll appreciate everything that I cover there. It's probably too broad of a topic to cover right now.
Okay, gotcha, and I think it's this video right here that I'm showing, correct?
Yep, that's the
Awesome.
one.
Cool. Real time. Look at this technology we have, people.
It's
Okay.
awesome.
how and when do I pay for a debt settlement? Do I pay up front? Do I pay at the end? I'm talking to I can't tell the name here. I'm talking to some company that is asking me to pay up front.
Well, so I don't know enough about your situation, but I will caution everybody watching this
Hmm.
that you probably don't belong working with a debt settlement company who's going to charge you any fee
Hmm.
in advance of actually effectuating an outcome. So they
Hmm.
get you a settlement, put it in front of you in black and white, and then you start performing on that settlement. It's okay if you pay a lump sum settlement and they'll collect their fee right then because you paid the creditor.
Mhm.
It's also okay if you're doing a settlement over 24 months, do that a lot,
Mhm.
and they can get their fee after you send that first of 24 payment in, right? That's when you have a feeable, kind of a billable
Mhm.
experience in the debt settlement industry.
Mhm.
So if you're working with somebody who's actually charging you a bunch of money before they actually get a settlement, that's probably not the best place for you.
Okay, gotcha. We have time for one more question here, and then we burned up this time. We're gonna have to get you on for like an hour webinar, Michael. One more question here. I have a lot of student loans, and I'm trying to file bankruptcy, but I don't think I can get those discharged in bankruptcy. Can I get a settlement on those? So one quick question or one quick point, and then I'll let you handle that, Michael. So there actually are some situations where you can get certain types of student loans discharged in bankruptcy. It's rare. If you go to upsolve.org, which I'll throw up on the screen here for those that aren't familiar with it, and you click on this Get Debt Help button, this tool will actually help you figure out if you can discharge your student loans through bankruptcy. It's not everybody. It's, I would say, like 5 to 10% of the cases where it is dischargeable at the most, but this tool will help you figure that out. So, beyond that, though, Michael, can you settle student loan debt?
The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
If it's private student loan debt, not government backed in
Yeah.
any way, just go to your NSLDS, portal, and if
Hmm.
the debt in question is on the NSLDS board, then it's federal.
Okay.
If your student loan is not in the NSLDS system, it's likely private, and we can settle private student loans. I have been my whole
Hmm.
career. You cannot settle a government-backed student loan for less than the principal balance. Sometimes they'll abate penalties and interest, but
Hmm.
that's not a settlement of the principal,
Hmm.
right?
Okay.
So Congress has not empowered the Department of Education to do that. It could change, but as of today, and for a long, long time now, you're really stuck with federal loans. There are a lot of different payment options, so make sure
Hmm.
and look at that. Your servicer is required to talk to you about them if you can't discharge those. And the federal loans, talk to your servicer about any of the options to rehab and all the
Okay.
things that go with it.
Got it. Well, thanks for that. And thanks everybody for your time. Thanks, Michael, for answering all these questions. We definitely have to have you on again because I can tell we just scratched the surface. For anybody who wants to learn more from you, Michael, or get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to reach you?
So everybody should know this, that I spend a lot of my time on the phone with consumers. That's
Hmm,
my That's part of my job.
love it.
I've always stayed connected to it, even when I'm on bigger projects. I still fill up my calendar at least a little bit every day, accessible to anybody that wants to take that time. So
Hmm.
when you're on YouTube and you go to one of the video descriptions, there's a link to my calendar. I think Ben's going to put a link up here to my
Yep.
calendar. You can schedule a 15-minute call with me and I can direct traffic. I can give you insights. I can help
Cool.
you know what to do and everything. It's totally free. I have no expectations on that call, but other than to just help you. So you just schedule time with me. I do respond to everybody's comments 7 days a week with my morning coffee on my website and also on my YouTube channel. So there's ways to ask me questions without scheduling a phone call.
Cool. And your website is this consumerrecoverynetwork.com, correct?
You bet.
Awesome. So you can get into Michael's morning coffee time. Michael, I saw we got one other question that snuck in under the gun here before they got us offline. And I know you love helping people. So I'm going to give you this last one and then we'll sign off. Uh, if it looks like Chapter 7 is my best option and I have enough money to pay the minimum credit card balance this month, when do I stop paying my minimum monthly payments if I know the writing is on the wall?
So I try not to get in a position where I tell people when and why to stop paying
Yeah,
their bills. I
sure.
will tell you this, that if you talk to a bankruptcy attorney, and you should get a consult in your local community, But most any bankruptcy attorney that hears from you and you guys get together and it's like, hey, I'm going to file bankruptcy. I'm 100% certain I'm going to do this.
Mhm.
Then they'll tell you to not pay your credit cards because there's no point. In
Mm.
fact, the court actually can claw back the payments that you sent to the creditor,
Oh,
right?
wow.
So, yeah, but be certain about the choice you're making.
Hmm.
Tell people, even, and I said this at the beginning, that settlement requires you to be late. Don't fall late until you know exactly what you're going to do, right?
Hmm.
And you're confident of your decision. Same thing with bankruptcy. Don't fall late until you're 100% certain that that's exactly what you're going to do.
Hmm.
But talk to an attorney.
I love that. Always good advice. Well, thanks again, Michael. Thanks everybody who joined us. If you found this webinar helpful, please check out the other resources at upsolve.org. Also, check out Michael's website, consumerrecoverynetwork.com, and find him on YouTube, Michael Bovee. He has just endless amounts of great advice. So if you've enjoyed watching him, hearing him here on this channel, check his page out as well. Michael, I think we're going to have you back soon. Yeah?
Yeah, anytime.
Beautiful. Okay, cool. And if you have any other questions, drop them in the comments or follow us on social media for more expert insights. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and we will see you again next Monday.